All right, so next we're going to move on to the door area, and we're going to do this in a very similar manner. We're just going to use slightly different colors, different textures, and so on. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and just do a rectangular selection around the whole door itself. I'm going to make the trim and the door similar colors for that. So create a new layer and we'll call this door background. Just so I have a base color to work with here. I think we'll see if I can find a nice like dark green like this. Use my fill command and say OK. Now I've lost my line drawing because it has gotten buried by some other things. So let's go ahead and bring that back up to the front so I can see it again. Ultimately, we're probably going to turn that line drawing off because, again, if we zoom in and look at our brick when we do that, it definitely does not look very natural. So I'm really only moving that line drawing up there for now so that I can see it to make selections more easily for my door here. So I might want this door to look more like, maybe it's a painted wood door. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a wood texture perhaps. And let's start with our trim. So I'm going to subtract the inside of the door from this. And let's go ahead and save this selection. Call it door trim. Okay. And let's choose a slightly darker version of that green to start with. And I just need to find a brush that's going to give me a good green-like finish, as if I was doing a dry brush finish on here. Now, as I scroll past these, we see I do have some brushes that give us a wood texture. I think we'll do those, we'll talk about how I got those in a separate video. Because you can make custom brushes based on an image in Photoshop, and that is a lesson for another time. So mostly I need to find a brush that has some variation, like this one might be a good choice. We need to make a new layer. And from here, if I click and drag, I'm probably not going to get a very straight line, and that's typically not a good sign for wood. So I'm going to undo that. And rather than doing the wobbly line up here, I'm going to click my brush outside of it, but not drag. I'm just going to tap one time my brush, and then I'm going to come up to the top up here. I'm going to hold down that shift key, and it's going to create a nice straight line for me. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to click down at the bottom just to give a little bit more texture here and to create a variation. If I zoom in on that, you can see the results a little bit better. It's a little bit too regular, but I think we'll live with it for now. I also have an issue at the top up here that I'm going to have to deal with. So I think actually I'm going to delete that and try again. In fact, I'm going to delete that and take some of this excess out, because if I was to actually paint this, I would probably have a diagonal cutoff here. So if I use my selection tool, hold down the Alt key or the Option key, and click on that corner, and I'm going to subtract this other section from my selection here. That way I'm only going to be painting inside of the left side trim here. And I can go way outside of it and make sure I get a different, or I get those lines to go all the way up and down the surface, and they get cut off at that diagonal. So I'm going to make these a little bit darker, and I'm actually going to make the brush a tiny bit smaller. I'll get a more of a fine line in here. So click outside of the selection, click down, click outside, hold the shift key down, and that's giving me a little bit better of a texture. So then if I can go in and pick another color, something a little bit darker perhaps, and I can layer on some more color in here. Variation is always good. So click outside, scroll up, hold down the shift key. Oh, look what I did. I must have accidentally changed my color here. So if that ever happens, I think I held down my option key. When you hold down the option key, it turns it into that color picker color. So be careful of that. That's what just happened. But the nice thing about Photoshop, and if you have your swatches window open, you can go right back and go right back to the color that you were just using. So again, click outside of the selection, scroll down, and then just hold the shift key down, click again, and it will create that nice straight line. So I'm going to continue this texture all the way around, and eventually I will have that finish on there. All right, so I've created some texture around that door. And the next thing I probably need to do is similar textures on the door frame itself. So it really becomes about making the appropriate selections, dealing with, door structure, door architecture. Typically the sides are going to go the full height of the door, and then the pieces in between fit inside of here. So as you make your selections, just make sure you are keeping that in some semblance of reality, so that it looks like a door would actually be built. So let's go ahead and make a new layer again. This is going to be the door base texture. And I'm just going to use my rectangular marquee to make my selections. Or really, I'm going to go into the line drawing, use the magic wand tool, and that's going to give me the overall finish here. I do want to go ahead and add in, I don't want to deal with this doorknob just yet, so I'm just going to add in that so it goes on top of it. And let's go ahead and expand that selection. I think this time I'm only going to do it 2 though. All right, and then from here I can use my subtract tool, change that, hold the option alt key down and remove the top and bottom. And make sure I got, looks like I'm one pixel row short, so I'm just gonna zoom way in so I can get a nice accurate selection. I'll do the same thing over here. So again, hold the option key down, That's what happened. Undo that. And again, go make sure you go back to the layers that you're working with and door-based texture. That's where we were. That's where we were working. So I'm going to go ahead similarly to how I created the texture on those. And we're going to differentiate these levels because in theory this trim texture would be higher in if this was an actual three-dimensional door, the door is inset within the trim. So we'll add some different effects to make that pop out better. But for now, and notice I'm going back and forth between these two colors, so I don't have to find those same colors again. I can just go to my swatches and go back and forth to make sure I am getting all of the color correctly added in there. I'm going to go ahead and do all of these other sections at the same time. Because this lower, the parts in between here, I'm imagining are all the same plane. And then these panels here are a different surface. Okay, and then back to my paintbrush with similar tools here, but going side to side rather than up and down this time. Okay, and then last but not least, we have our vertical sections here. Now notice on these I can go all the way straight up and down because I have these sections cut out, so I know that the paintbrush tool is not going to work on those areas that are not selected. Alright, deselect that, have a look. So it's starting to come together as an overall texture. If I turn that layer off, it should turn that whole base door off by itself, and that is a good thing. We want to keep that separate. All right, next we will work on the panels, and I'll just use the magic wand tool to select these panels and go back in and add in my door handle and then expand my selection. Again, expanding the selection from the line drawing just allows you to overlap the actual lines in the drawing, because ultimately you don't want to see those. Create a new layer. Call these door panel. And I'm going to move those up above. And we'll have these have a vertical texture, but it's going to be the same basic texture as what we've been working with so far. Okay, let's deselect that, have a look. Now, if you wanted there to be a bit more variety, especially in these panels that go up and down, you might do those individually just so they'll have a little bit more variation in between. It might look a little bit better for you, but just for a quick, surface texture, this is going to work pretty well. And we'll go about creating some distance in some of these panels in the next video.